in case you missed it, which I didn't, I saw a little bit of coverage on this, and it surprised me in so many different ways. And yet I also disagree and agree with some of it. We're going to get all of our feelings out here about it. But so from Mark Wogenrich and his all Penn State FN website, there's a headline is Penn State Wrestling turns up the volume on awkwardly quiet rec hall. And it walks through Cael Sanderson's comments at a press conference this week after the Ohio State match, and kind of Cael calling out Rec Hall for being, quote, awkwardly quiet. He says Rec Hall is like awkwardly quiet. We need to make some noise in there. I did hear a couple people saying, turn off the music. If people made more noise, we would turn the music off. It's just so quiet in there. And then he goes on to say, you could hear a 4-year-old kid in the corner yell, we are. And if that's the case, it's too quiet. It's awkward. This is a sporting event. Let's make some noise. There's so much to unpack in this quote, because the first thing that surprised me is who said this. Like if you presented this almost blank to me, you know who I would say said this? Pat Chambers. And I was going to say Pat Chambers, but you say Pat Kraft. Why Pat Kraft? Because I know Pat Chambers is the basketball.
I guess just because Pat Chambers is gone, but I just think Pat Kraft is. We're looking for every way to make an atmosphere, make a dime, make it different, make a change, make it loud, right? That's all. Pat Chambers wasn't on my mind in the wheelhouse like it was for you.
I think what surprised me is that Cael said this, and I think what surprised me when I thought through the not logistics but of all of this, the logic of all of this, is thinking back to Friday's match. And I don't. Steve pays a lot more attention to wrestling than I do, so correct me if I'm wrong. But I watched it on TV, and the first match ends in a controversial decision, replay review, essentially. The second match is a loss, a loss. And then about halfway through the match, there's a really surprising pin by an Ohio State wrestler that kind of nobody saw coming. And each one of those moments took the energy out of the arena. That being said, this was really Penn State's biggest wrestling match at home for the year, regardless of location. And so it was a little weird to see Penn State react that way. But I kind of then thought about it a little more and thought about our discussion of what we've had during football season and kind of how football is, going back to Brad's interview, scripted, and the emotions that are evoked there. And they have been heavily leaning into like songs and this whole, the greatest show is back, right? Like that's the slogan. You see that slogan a lot more prominently. And I think I'm going to take like the old guy route on this, but I don't think there's anything wrong with just going and enjoying the event. And I don't know. I agree that Cael Sanderson should get whatever he wants. He can have whatever he wants at Penn State. But also at the same time, like, this is going to sound weird because this is not what I'm saying, but there's a complacency. I think there's a complacency with Penn State wrestling because they just are so good that I don't know. It was a weird moment, and that in the moment of the match, it was weird. Takes the crowd out, but I also making it a sideshow or making a sideshow out of the main event is also particularly weird. That bothers me. So it's somewhere in the middle there. There's a lot of little avenues with this.
Yeah, and I'm not writing about this piece of it for the blog. Well, I'm going to have a piece for it up on the blog this week. I'm not going to write about this piece. And this piece is the part that, as I think about it, befuddles and maybe angers me a little bit. He essentially took a swipe at the fans, right? Both the old fans who are too quiet and the young fan. I got to tell you, I've been going to wrestling matches for on and off since I was a student. There's a lot of 4-year-old fans who made their night by saying "we are" and igniting a cheer that starts through the crowd at that place. Because wrestling is quiet in between sections, right? So that 4-year-old that he heard, that was that kid's biggest moment of his life to date. And he has just backslapped that kid for saying that so everybody could hear him, right? Plus, he's made fun of the old people who aren't making noise. So I get it. I know they're going to game day presentation stuff. I know they're going to go this way with it. This music is not going away. But it just feels weird that to get there, you're going to dismiss or diss the fans along the way. And that was one of the things that I struggle with. And there's still a lot of other stuff to unpack and write about, which is what I'm going to do with it. Like, I don't know. Wrestling isn't a sport where you need that music. Walk-up music, when Darian's going to the mat and he picks his favorite song as his walk-up music, that's cool. And I would like to be able to hear it. I don't want to hear whatever else is going on. I don't know. Sometimes it's okay just for the event to create the atmosphere itself without having to be told what to do.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's how I feel about it.
I felt wrestling was kind of pure that way. I felt wrestling was kind of like the one where our dudes are just really good. We're going to come out and kick your butt.
Yeah.
And part of it is complacency. I mean, these home matches are not in debate. I mean, Penn State wrestled okay, maybe poorly at spots against Ohio State and still won easily, right? Yeah. So it's not like you're going there doubting the outcome. So it's kind of hard to get from that doubt to that rise of emotion because you're not going to go on that ride with them. You're starting up here to begin with. Your expectations are here. There's not going to be an emotional ride during the thing. If it is, it's going to be grumpiness and quiet because you're ticked off, or you're disappointed, right? So some part of it is complacency a little bit, but I don't know. I know it's coming. I'm not surprised that they're doing it. It just felt the way it came out, you were smacking your fans as you were going about it. And I don't know. That's not the way. But they're selling out. Somebody else will take that person's ticket if they don't go. So it's all good.
That's what a couple of weird things are about it. It's like, number one, they're still selling out. They're what, on 50 some sellouts in a row. So there's that. I do agree, especially with the part of, for whatever reason, wrestling more than any other sport, wrestling was the attraction. Like even with football, and I feel, I go to the football game for the football game, right? But like, I would say 40% of that stadium, 30% of that stadium, particularly when they're playing Delaware or Indiana or Rutgers or one of not Ohio State, not upper tier opponent, at least 30% of the fans there are there because they're making an event, a moment with their family. And with wrestling, it is everybody's locked in on the wrestling match. Like, and I just think it is it's a greedy problem to have. And I think that's kind of what he's maybe alluding to. I don't know if he necessarily alludes to it. I don't know if that's the correct word, but he calls it out, or at least starts to acknowledge the elephant in the room a little bit of like, okay, like this is, like you said, like if football is 20 feet between expectation and reality, wrestling is 5 inches between expectation and reality of what you're going to get. And it's hard to kind of be fired up about that. And I've been thinking about that particularly for whatever reason that with this wrestling season, and maybe it's just because I have a blog and we have the blog and kind of have an opportunity to think about it a little more. But yeah, I don't know. It's still going to be the hottest ticket in town. It's still the hottest ticket in town. Like if you sell one of your tickets, you're going to make money on it type thing. So I don't know. I don't mind it, but I understand what he's saying. I'm also okay with him playing the music, but also make some noise. Just don't be ungrateful for what I think is what he's trying to say here is don't be ungrateful for what he's had. But I do think like particularly the 4-year-old kid thing, you're right. Like that was a big moment when you were a little kid.
That was that kid night. Yeah. And it's that way through generations. And I think they've fixed some stuff with wrestling through the years. My biggest gripe was, and I think they changed it a couple of years ago. They used to, because the wrestling tradition is that if you can't hear the clock counting down, there'd be a kid that would hit you with a towel, hit the back of the official with a towel to let them know the clock got down. Well, we're in Rec Hall or the Jordan Center. Those horns are loud enough for those folks to hear. Plus, there's 2 officials, but there'd still be a girl, like a college student from the booster club, following along with a towel on the outside of the mat with 16,000 people watching. it always looked low budget, and I think they've finally gotten rid of that, which is great for presentation. They still have to figure out bout scores in the Jordan Center when they do it. So sound is like the least of their problems, but this is all sports marketing, sports presentation, sports making a sporting event a show. And I think sometimes a sporting event can just be a sporting event.
Yeah. And I think particularly with how good wrestling is.